That's 20 GMT. Now, we heard a couple of things coming out of this procedural meeting, too. The Libyan ambassador to the United Nations, who had been absent since last Friday, it was his deputy ambassador from Libya to the UN. That's who we're hearing from yesterday, primarily. He is also here, but the ambassador himself, and he, out of this procedural meeting of the Security Council this morning, he said a couple of things, that he does not want to directly attack Gaddafi. He has tried to make contact with Colonel Gaddafi, but has not been able to. He does not support a no-fly zone. Now, this is something different than the deputy ambassador from Libya to the United Nations was saying yesterday. He was calling for a no-fly zone. And also, a little bit more detail on this 3 p.m. meeting. Again, that's 20 GMT this afternoon. There'll be a briefing by the Secretariat as well as the deputy Libyan ambassador to the United Nations. After that, there'll be closed consultations by the Security Council, after which during this closed consultations, they'll consider their response and a statement, and then after that, they'll make a statement to the press as to, the Security Council's position on what's happening in Libya, and then hopefully some details of what the next steps will be and what the United Nations actions in Libya will be. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that meeting because, as you were saying, a lot of people were expecting the issue of the no-fly zone to be debated, but it sounds as though that's in some kind of debate.
Right, and what it is we've also heard from background from permanent 5 member that of the Security Council that has really not been it wasn't floated as a feasible option in these meetings now. Again, this morning that just ended procedural. The real meeting is going to take place at 20 GMT this afternoon, 3 p.m. this afternoon here, and it doesn't seem like the no-fly zone potential is going to be discussed or at least come through in this statement. Again, these are closed doors, so it might be discussed, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be a part of the statement and/or next steps, if you will, from the Security Council. But the big thing right now is that the head of mission from Libya to the United Nations did show up today. We didn't hear word that he was back in town. There was word yesterday that he Monday, that he was out of town, not in New York. But now we know he is back there and he is participating in these meetings with the Security Council.
OK, Scott, thanks very much indeed for that. Scott Heidler at the United Nations in New York there. Now, as I say, we're waiting for Gaddafi to make a statement on Libyan state television. These are pictures coming out of Tripoli, which are being broadcast on Libyan state television. This looks like it's showing the outside of a government building where we're expecting Gaddafi to make a televised speech, a recorded televised speech to the country, and we will bring you that when it happens. Now, in Europe, there have been more protests and condemnation over the Libyan crisis. Barbara Serra joins me now with more on that. Barbara.
Shuli, thank you. Yes, several European countries are planning how to evacuate their citizens from Libya. But there are also growing questions over the trade links that many share with Gaddafi's regime. All of this taking place against an increasing number of protests. Well, one of these protests is expected to take place outside the home of the British Prime Minister at Downing Street in central London. AlJazeera's Tim Friend is there. Tim, it certainly looks like the demonstration is well and truly underway. What do the people gathered there want?
Well, they've come from all over Britain. They are Libyans who've been in exile. They are people who are concerned about their own relatives, of course, in Libya. But what they also want from the British Prime Minister, who, of course, is on a tour at the moment of the Middle East, they want him to help establish a no-fly zone in Libya to try to ensure the safety of the people there. Let's talk to one of the organisers, Hassan El Amin. You're going to be delivering a petition later to Downing Street. What will you be asking for specifically?
We'll be specifically asking for declaring non-flight zone over Libya, because the British, the Americans, they know exactly where these airplanes are taking off from. We want support. Obviously, there is no question about any foreign troops getting inside Libya. That is absolutely out of the question. But they know that they can stop this by other means without having to interfere inside. That's very important. The other thing, there are a lot of Gaddafi's activists in Britain here. They got to monitor them and monitor their activities because they are threatening Libyan opposition here. And also there are a lot of them who got big, massive accounts. They got to investigate that as well.
Do you think the British and their allies have done enough so far or acted quickly enough over Libya?
No, they haven't. We have warned the British and the Western governments and America years ago when they started dealing with Gaddafi. We told them from this place, don't trust Gaddafi. Gaddafi will never change. They didn't believe us. They gave him a platform. They brought him back and they forgive him. And at the time when he sorted his problem with the West, he did nothing to sort out his problem with the Libyans. Now, this is the result, Tony Blair. The handshake of Tony Blair, now you could see the result of it inside Tripoli. Right now, Gaddafi's people in Tripoli are clearing the street from the bodies because they want to bring the media in and to tell them that nothing has happened and all what the media is saying is lies.
Hassan, thanks for talking to us. I'm going to talk to a colleague now. Mohammed Makhlouf, a long-time political activist and exile here in London. Your colleague or comrade there was saying that he's concerned the West haven't done enough. David Cameron's on a tour of the Middle East at the moment. There's been criticism that while he's talking about democracy, he's also got arms dealers with him. Do you think the West has learned its lesson, or do you think they've still got a lot to learn?
I don't think the lesson has been learned. I think the West will be always the West. The hypocrisy of the West, you can, the title of it is, Gaddafi used to be in the 70s, used to be called the mad dog of the Middle East. Now, he is our friend. That's the hypocrisy of the West. They don't care about the Arabs. They don't care about the Libyans. All they care is about the oil. This is now the new generations of the Arab people. This is what they feel, and this is what they know. They know this. They know this hypocrisy. So the better for the West to change their sides, to switch their sides, and to side with the people of the Arab countries.
Mohammed, we'll have to leave it there. We've run out of time. Well, as you've been hearing, enormous anger here, mixed with concern about relatives back home. Back to you.
Indeed. Tim Friend outside 10 Downing Street in central London. Thank you. Well, British authorities may have strongly denounced the attacks on protesters in Libya, but in recent years, British governments have come to see Gaddafi as a vital business partner and a close ally in the so-called war on terror. Barnaby Phillips explains why.
They chanted abuse outside their embassy in London, and maybe the Libyan leader has run out of time. But for the British, this is awkward. A former Prime Minister famously reached out to Muammar Gaddafi. If Tony Blair had concerns about his host's human rights record, he put strategic issues first. And that position is defended by the British government today.
It is important that the work was done some years ago to work with the Libyan government to stop their weapons of mass destruction.